it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Tonight is the second piece featured on my channel by Mr. Luke Hemingway. You may remember him from the story I did last week. My ex-husband just escaped from maximum security prison. In tonight's adventure, we follow the White Van Man. The White Van Man, Part 1. Before we begin, I need to declare that I'm not using any real names in this story, as I don't want to give away my new identity and break my witness protection, WITSEC, agreement. Anonymity is definitely preferred in my particular situation. I'll also not be referencing the year or particular area this took place in. I'm writing this out as I think it would be therapeutic for me to process this traumatic event by putting it down on paper in words. Initially, I never intended to post this on the internet, but I'm hoping it helps in any small way to shine a light on some of the disappearances in my area. I am bound by the law to keep my mouth shut on this subject, as the investigation is ongoing and highly classified due to its sensitivity, whatever that means. Oh, and don't be a wise ass and try and find anything in the media on this. It's all being suppressed to protect vulnerable parties. And again, I don't know what our handler meant by that. But anyway, I'm speaking out because I've had enough. I'm done living my cozy new life while other people are still at risk, still in danger. The people who live in the country where I grew up need to be aware and vigilant of this ongoing problem. But at this moment, its specifics are kept tightly under wraps by the FBI. Now, remember to keep your kids and loved ones close and in clear sight. Oh, anyway, rant over. Here's my story. I'm going to call myself Olivia Matthews. At the time of these events, I was 12 years old and 2 weeks from my 13th birthday. I'd always felt mature for my age, but even so, everyone says, looks-wise, I didn't look a day over 9. It was Thursday, the 27th of June, and I'd just finished school for the day. There wasn't anything different about the day itself. There were no feelings of being watched, no overwhelming sense of dread or impending sense of doom, no warning signs whatsoever. I thought I was just a normal kid with a normal life. Now, on a side note, I think everyone's guilty of hearing horrible things on the news that have happened to regular people all over the world, such as abductions and murders, with at no point ever truly thinking it would happen to you. Perhaps we become slightly more vigilant when walking home and make sure to check our door locks for a few nights afterwards, until the novelty wears off and the complacency once again sets in. Right, back to the story. So, on this particular day, I just got within 150 yards of my house and was just turning the corner to enter my street, when a man fell in step with me from behind. He literally seemed to come from nowhere, and I certainly didn't hear his footsteps while he was approaching me. "Well, hello there," he said with a smile. It wasn't a sinister smile, but not a friendly one either. It was the type of smile you'd do if you were showing someone what a smile was. There lacked, emotion behind it. It seemed completely put on. It was a mask to hide the real face that lurked beneath. "Hi," I murmured back after a brief scan of my mind to figure whether or not I actually knew this man. I looked him up and down, as if doing a full body scan would help me to try and put a name to the grinning face glaring into my soul, and I noticed that he was dressed in all dark clothing. Dark jeans, dark long-sleeve shirt, black thick shoes. He looked around mid to late 30s, medium-length greasy slick-back hair. His superficial smile branded a single row of off-color white teeth with a gold premolar tooth on the left side, which seemed to sparkle in the mid-afternoon sun, almost matching his charmy act. He continued to make eye contact. He didn't have what you'd call an intimidating physique, but he was just under 6 foot and had a rugged look to his face and hands. Well, I couldn't take him in a fight, let's put it that way. At first his presence wasn't a threatening one, at least not to me at the time anyway. But I figured then, and I definitely know now, that this wasn't normal. I'd racked my mind over and over, and was now confident I didn't know this man. I'd started to realize he'd waited until I'd walked far enough to no longer be surrounded by other people from the bus, and I'd just turned the corner onto my cul-de-sac and was within 70 yards of my house. My empty house, with no one home to rescue me. I tried not to panic initially. I told myself that he'd only said hi and we were in broad daylight. But then things took a turn towards the sinister and he started asking questions that got more and more alarming. At first it was just, it's a lovely day today, isn't it? And how's school treating you? Stuff like that. I just answered, yes, fine, avoiding eye contact, hoping that he'd get the hint, as I had no interest in talking to this stranger. But then his approach changed. I like your pigtails. They make you look real cute. He said this in a deep voice, and his breathing had increased. And then he added, so, do you live in one of these houses? This honestly made my toes curl in my little white dolly shoes, and this is when things started to turn south. I should mention on my cul-de-sac there are only 5 houses, so I couldn't lie to him, as why else would I be walking there? His question seemed completely rhetorical. He'd obviously followed me and watched where I walked before he approached me. Is your mummy or daddy home? Yes, I lied, but in my panic I hadn't realized I'd already pulled my keys out of my pocket in case I needed to get in my door quick. And I could tell his predatory instincts had sensed this already. I could almost feel a hunger inside him grow as he realized he'd caught me out, and also he'd noticed me staring at my own front door out of anxiety. Damn, I'd messed up. Coupled with the fact he'd already guessed I had the keys to open the door, he knew there wasn't anyone there to let me in. He knew I'd be alone in that house. His voice seemed to tremble now with a poorly restrained excitement that made my blood run cold. His questions became more alarming by the second. My car's broken down and I need to call a cab. He seemed to emphasize the word need. May I come to your house and use your phone? I started to sweat. I knew this was a lie. Why would the only person you asked to help be a defenseless 11-year-old girl? I felt my body start to pump adrenaline. I was in real danger. My body knew it before I did. Thinking back, there were so many red flags about this man. I should have realized sooner. I don't think the man blinked once during the whole exchange, and every time he finished a sentence, his face would reset to that same put-on smile. His eyes had nothing to them. He would look at me and have that look in his eye like a wolf looks at a wounded deer right before it drags its screaming carcass into the woods and tears it to pieces. I remember feeling like prey that day every time that man looked at me. I was desperate. I needed to think of something. So I pathetically attempted the stranger danger line and told him my mum doesn't like me talking to strangers. He scoffed and answered with fluency that his name was Dave, and they asked me my name. I said, Gina. Yes, I lied again. The way he grinned and said, well then, Gina, now we're introduced. We're no longer strangers. 2 things haunted me about how he reacted. The fluency of his comeback almost suggested he'd been confronted with this line before, and the way he said Gina, as if he knew I was lying and was humoring me. Or maybe he just didn't care, as soon I would become just a statistic. I tried to think on my feet again to try to get him to leave me alone, or at least think I wasn't as easy pickings as he clearly thought. I needed to think of something that would make him believe that someone was home. Or maybe my brother's up. He works nights, but he gets up around now, so you can borrow his mobile, or maybe he'll get your car going. I attempted. Well, I genuinely thought this was brilliant. It explained why the door might be locked, but still gave the impression that someone was home. But this didn't rattle him. His facial expression changed almost immediately, not in a good way. He pulled a pair of black leather gloves from his back pocket and began sliding them on with a sadistic excitement that told me he was calling my bluff. Brilliant. Well then, let's go see your brother. I looked up helplessly, lost for a response, at the man who now knew he had me. He could smell it a mile away that I was lying. I stared up, dumbfounded, at an experienced predator who knew how to corner his prey. A tear started to escape from my eye as I froze in terror at the realization I was done. He put his now gloved hand on the top of my back and ushered me towards my house. My entire frame was trembling. My blood was pumping around my body at a rate I didn't know possible, and I was trying my hardest to hold back a flood of tears. At this point, I know what you're thinking. What kind of parents leave their 12-year-old child alone for hours on end? But we live in a seriously good neighborhood. The sort of place where kids half my age play in the streets for hours while their parents share a glass of gin in the backyard, gossiping and bitching about the rest of the neighborhood, and where the men all go to the same local bar and go bowling together. But I think this entire event and the events that lead on from it changed our little suburban utopia forever. So, there I was in the hands of a pure predator, a man who'd actually manipulated me and got me to invite him into my own home. And now he was going to do whatever he wanted to me between now and when my mum arrived home in 4 hours. I desperately scanned my street for assistance. The neighbours on my left were out of town, and the ones on the right, well, their cars were missing. Not a good sign. The other houses were too far behind me now for me to try and run, and the man had me walking straight forward. The man sensed this, and he gave me a psst. He met my gaze and made me follow his to the obscenely sized knife he had concealed in his sleeve. I knew if I screamed, I was dead. I knew if I stayed quiet, I was dead. So I closed my eyes, held my breath, and tried to go to a happy place. But it was useless. All I could picture was the horrific things this man would do to me, and what would happen when my family came home to find my mutilated corpse. Or worst of all, not find me at all. I would belong to this man forever. All of a sudden, we stopped. I assumed we were at my front door. I started to sob, reluctant to pass over the keys. But after a few seconds, I didn't feel the man take them, so I opened my eyes to see what was happening, praying to see a cop or a neighbour confronting the man. We weren't at my door. We'd reached the foot of my driveway and stopped dead in our tracks. But there was no one there. We were still alone. No one had come to save me from the man, and that broke my spirit that little bit more. To think you have hope and then have it snatched away is a soul-destroying moment. I closed my eyes as I awaited the man's instruction, but then I felt his hand slip, and he let out a no. His voice had slipped from this superficial charm and fluency to murmuring, and his voice took on a panic tone. I opened my eyes again. I looked at Dave's face. The violent, malicious smile and the excited immediacy to his posture had now totally vanished. He looked as scared as I'd been 10 seconds ago. His hand that had been ushering me inside was now on his head, with a tight grip on his greasy hair, whilst he now stared, in what seemed like disbelief, into the section of pavement at the bottom of my driveway. He started to exhale, faster and faster. He also started to dart his vision at random places all around the surrounding area. For the first time, the man started to actually look like he was scared of being caught. He backed away from me and started to make a hasty retreat off my street. He started walking backwards at first, while snapping his head side to side as if looking for something. His pace started to pick up, and he booked it around the corner. Well, by this time, I'd snapped out of my daze from the last 2 minutes and dashed over to my front door. I rammed my keys into the lock, and after around 10 attempts and a mini panic attack, my key finally slid in the hole, and a few seconds later I was throwing the door shut behind me and locking it up tight. It was only after the second deadbolt was in place and the chain was on that I actually started to feel safe. I quickly ran to the living room window to make sure my parents hadn't left it on night lock, meaning that Dave could come back later on and pry it open with his big knife. I ran upstairs to call the police. This was when I saw the man run around the corner to the left of my cul-de-sac. Now, I should mention at this point, the corner houses have pretty huge hedges that restrict the view of the adjoining main road. But from my vantage point in my bedroom, I could just make out the top of a white transit van, around 50 yards from the entrance to my cul-de-sac. As the man turned the corner, he left my vision, and I presumed he would make a swift exit down the street. But something caught my eye. I could see the top 30 centimeters of the van and its side door slid open around the time the man would have been making his way past the stationary vehicle, and then the door slammed shut, and a few seconds later the van drove away. I desperately tried to get the license number of the van, but I couldn't get a clear view from my line of vision. I remembered thinking about the lie the man had told me about his car being broken down, and wishing I'd noticed the van before. I punished myself on missing it. Maybe if I'd caught him out on it then, perhaps he would have gotten cold feet and just left me alone. Oh, this had really shaken me. I was scared and I just wanted the police to come and arrest this man so I could sleep at night. After the adrenaline wore off, and I was now sure Dave had left and wasn't coming back, I decided it was pointless to call the police. I I only had what I assumed was a fake name and a vague description of a mass-produced vehicle with no license plate. They would likely just tell me to call back if he showed up again, and to make sure all my doors and windows were locked, which they were. And the main issue is they would tell my mum, maybe even get her in some sort of trouble for me being alone, who knows. It didn't seem worth the risk, as I was safe now. I would likely never be allowed to walk home from school alone or have the house to myself ever again, and I liked doing those things. They made me feel grown up. So I decided Dave wasn't coming back, mainly because of the way he'd reacted when he saw whatever he saw at the bottom of my driveway. Whatever it was had really spooked him, and he booked it out of there pretty goddamn fast. My train of thought connected with my eyes, and they pointed themselves at my driveway. And that's when I saw it. At the foot of my drive, on the pavement. A yellow drawing in what looked like chalk or paint. I went down to investigate. I made my way to what I can only describe as some sort of symbol on the ground. At first, I really didn't know what I was looking at. It was some sort of crude drawing of a moth, butterfly, with simple shapes inside of a quickly drawn circle. No detail, just the very brief outline of the aforementioned insect, inside a circle that had been done similar to how you draw the @ sign. I didn't know what to make of it. I was looking back in my mind, trying to think if I'd noticed something there prior to these events. But you know how it is. Kids on my street play with chalk all the time, drawing pictures, writing their names and mapping out a hopscotch course, stuff like that. So I never would have given this a second thought anyway. But whatever this meant, it had saved my life. It had put the fear of God into a frenzied paedophile who was moments away from having a 12-year-old girl at his mercy. Well, a few questions ran through my mind, until my mum came home. What was that symbol? What did it mean? Why did it cause Dave to have a mini heart attack and flee to his van? And how did I not notice the van before? Did Dave have a friend nearby, and that was his getaway, or worse, was he coming to join in? Why had he suddenly decided to follow me? And had he just seen me alone and turning onto my street? Or again worse, had he been watching me and learning my schedule and who'd be in my house at certain times? God, I was creeping myself out now. So I stopped tormenting myself and put some hilarious RKO out of nowhere videos on YouTube to lighten my mood, and tried my best to just forget about the whole thing. Still, when my mum eventually came home, I gave her the biggest hug and told her that I loved her. She immediately thought I'd done something wrong. Typical. We laughed about it, and soon Dave, and the white van, and the butterfly symbol mystery was slipping from my mind. Days went past since my close encounter, and before I knew it, it was Friday, the 5th of July, and I'd finished the final day of my school term for the summer. It had been just over a week since my run-in with the man who called himself Dave, and I'd slowly started to get over what had happened. Over the first few days since the incidents, I could have sworn I kept seeing that white van roaming around my area. But it wasn't in an obvious way. I'd kind of keep catching glimpses of a white transit van either parked around corners nearby or passing by in the side streets near my house and school. Either way, it always seemed to just come out of nowhere, like it did on that day. I'd always close my eyes tight and rub my eyelids as if to try and wake myself up. And it worked. Every time I opened my eyes, the van would be gone. In the end, I just chalked it up to a lack of sleep over the event and tried to convince myself I wasn't being rational. Even so, I found myself subconsciously not wearing headphones when walking, being more vigilant when walking past objects that people could hide behind, parked up vehicles and concealed walkways, just in case Dave was hiding somewhere waiting to jump out, grab me and finish what he'd started last week. And for a few days after, I made sure I always locked the front door and the windows when I got home to my empty house. I wasn't sleeping great either, constantly looking out my window on a night, making sure there wasn't a white van at the end of my street. Part 2. Ultimately, by the time the end of my last day of my school year rolled around 8 days later, I'd pretty much begun to move on with my life, and the whole thing was becoming a creepy tale that maybe I could share one day as an anecdote among friends, while sitting around a campfire or a table in a bar. On this particular day, my mum was still on her 12-12 shift at the hospital, and my dad was working away, again out of town. Again, I'm sure a lot of people may read this and be picturing me as some poor neglected kid with two parents more concerned about their careers and after-work drinks with colleagues. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. My parents taught me to be independent from an early age, and I was always trusted to look after myself. This allowed my parents to go do what they needed to do to make sure I had everything I needed. Up until this event and the insane roller coaster that followed, I'd always felt I had a great upbringing, and I'm so grateful for both my parents. And as it was a Friday and the holidays had begun, Mom said my friend, who we'll call Jessica, could stay over. Jessica and I had left school that day after saying goodbye to our classmates for 6 whole weeks. We didn't take the usual route home, however. You see, one of our other friends was being picked up by her mum. Being the kind of woman she was, she offered us a ride. They lived on the street behind our house, and there happened to be a small, convenient footpath through the trees in between the adjoining gardens that we could easily cut across to my backyard. It was raining, and we didn't fancy waiting for the pretty unreliable school bus in the cold. This meant also me, Jess, and our friend Daisy could also finalise our plans for us 3 meeting up over the summer holidays in a comfortable and warm Audi Q5. We obviously snatched the offer up. We entered my house through the back porch via my sliding patio doors and started the usual girly sleepover stuff you did at that age. We raided the cupboards for crisps and sweets to take up to my room for a movie marathon of Mean Girls, Angus Thongs, and John Tugger Must Die. I remember every detail from that night, for better or worse. The hours flew by and I was honestly enjoying our time together, watching movies whilst talking to our crushes on MSN and leaving sassy comments on our crushes' MySpace. We were living the pre-teen dream. It had gotten to around 10 p.m. and the sun was now down on our quiet suburban community, settled under a warm, dark blanket of summer night. We looked down to find our snack bowls were empty. I said I'd go get some more cheesy Doritos and sweet and salty popcorn, being a good host and all. However, Jessica, being the bubbly sprite that she was, said she'd go get them. She needed to use the bathroom anyway, she insisted. Now, I should note that our upstairs toilet had a tendency to stab you in the back when it came to flushing. I don't imagine she wanted to risk the embarrassment, and the mix of sugar-rich fizzy drinks and processed salty snacks had clearly taken its toll on her stomach. I didn't want to make things weird for her, so I gladly handed her my bowl. She hopped off the bed and walked to the doorway, and turned sharply to the right and made her way down the hall. However, just before she stepped out of sight behind where the bedroom door hinge is fixed to the landing wall, Jessica paused for a second to look back at me. She gave me a smile. I'm not entirely sure what the motivation behind it was, but it was a warm one, and I reciprocated. I think we were just sharing a strong bond of closeness, and we were both feeling the euphoria at the fact the school holidays had begun. 2 13-year-olds with a house to themselves with 6 weeks of school-free summertime ahead. Everything going for us and everything to look forward to. Who wouldn't want to crack a smile, eh? We weren't the most popular kids by any stretch, but that didn't matter, not to us. We had each other and a few other close friends. Our circle was certainly small, but that was more than enough for us. Oh, me and Jessica in particular were especially close. She was more like a sister to me. We'd been friends since I can remember my first memory. She was loyal to the core, and I was to her. We were inseparable, and people also often mistook us for each other. We'd always looked alike, and due to being so close, we tended to wear similar clothes and have our hair done the same way, almost like twins. In fact, I think it was only a few weeks before this event took place I started doing my hair in pigtails, to at least try and stand out from Jessica, but it was useless. Other than her being a little bigger than me, we were pretty much identical. Jessica's warm smile remained on her face until she moved out of sight and proceeded to make her way downstairs. Once she left my sight, I convinced myself to scooch down to the bottom of my bed from the comfy position I was in, all relaxed in the nest we'd made for ourselves from my pillows, duvet, and the corner of my room where my wall met my headboard. I guess pausing the film seemed the least I could do for Jessica, since she was grabbing the snacks and everything. The remote was set on my bedroom windowsill, which was situated upside the space between the foot of my bed and the TV in the corner of my room. My vision locked onto the item as I shimmied on my butt down the bed. I grabbed the remote, paused the movie, turned to replace it. As I lifted my head and broke eye lock with the remote for the first time, well, that's when I saw it. The top 30 centimeters of a white Ford Transit van. Discreet and innocuous, yet all the while unmistakable and nefarious. I once again attempted my previous trick and began closing my eyes tightly and rubbing them with my fingers, in the desperate attempt to wake myself up from what now seemed like a recurring nightmare. I put everything into the process, including a little prayer that I was dreaming for good measure, hoping that this yielded the same results as it had done earlier in the week, but this time, no matter how many times I repeated this, it never worked. Every time I unclenched my eyes, I could still just make out the top of that Ford Transit white van from just over my neighbour's garden hedge. This was getting real, and I felt my breathing increase. Oh crap, no way, I whimpered in disbelief. I was frozen in a state of denial and rationalization, trying to fight off the surge of pure terror that was threatening to erupt from within me. The realization hit me in the face like a bat, that if in fact this was the van, the same van from last week, then Dave would not be far away. I tried desperately to convince myself this was just another van, desperately looking for differences in size, color, or shape, but I couldn't. It was the same make, the same model, and I knew by the way it was parked, exactly how it was that day Dave had jumped inside it to make his getaway. Parked just around the left corner to the entrance of my cul-de-sac. What was hitting me now was an unwanted case of déjà vu. I was looking on in shock when the van, as if sensing I'd noticed it, suddenly burst alive. The engine fired and began to tick over, and its headlights unleashed their rays like a sleeping animal being awoken. And then, to my horror, it began to creep slowly around the corner and made its way onto my street. My eyes wouldn't look away. I watched it pull up directly in the middle of my cul-de-sac, side door aimed at the front of my house, lined up almost perfectly with the symbol at the bottom of the drive. Red flag number 1. I looked for the license plate. There wasn't one. Red flag number 2. The side door of the van snapped out of the closed position and the door slid backwards approximately 10 inches, revealing a preview of the dark abyss from within the vehicle. And then, from that very abyss, I noticed the third and final red flag. A black-gloved hand protruded from the darkness to place its palm on the edge of the door and began to carefully, as if not wanting to make too much noise, slide it open further. This made me snap out of my daze for the first time, and my senses came back to me. I needed to get down and make sure the doors were locked, as I couldn't remember if me and Jessica had locked the patio doors behind us when we'd come in. Jeez, we'd been so busy laughing and giggling about school and other stuff that maybe we'd forgotten. I needed to get her upstairs, barricade my room, and call my mom. I was just inhaling enough air into my already pulsating lungs so I could shout out her name loud enough for her to hear me, when I heard a noise. I honestly couldn't tell you what it was specifically. A simple, loud, sharp bang, followed by a series of slightly quieter, dull sounds. My blood had turned to pure ice. I couldn't comprehend the fear and terror that I was feeling right then. I spent the last 8 days suppressing that horrific feeling when the man I knew as Dave showed me his knife, but now it was back, worse than ever. I knew this wasn't good. I crept down the hallway to the beginning of my landing, where the stairs meet the upstairs hallway and the wall opposite my bedroom turns to a wooden banister. This allowed me to peek at a section of my downstairs area. I held my breath long enough so I could concentrate on trying to hear. There were no more noises, no loud bangs, just silence. Horrible, deafening silence. The only noise I could hear was the sound of my heartbeat pounding away in my eardrums. "Jessica," I managed to whisper, taking another 2 baby steps forward to increase my vantage point. This revealed my front door, ajar, with the chain hanging free. A jagged piece of the doorframe swung on from its limp end. "Jess!" My voice now broke in a desperate prayer for her to answer me back. Nothing was coming back to me, though. That's when I saw the soiled boot prints heading into the kitchen, leading to a half bowl of cheesy Doritos spread all over the floor, most of them crushed as if they'd been trampled on. The boot prints led in from the front door into the kitchen where the mess could be seen, and then they retreated back out of the house. I looked around, and the scene began to register in my mind and play out like a Crime Watch reconstruction video. I pictured the door being kicked open, the chain breaking. I then saw a man with fresh mud from our garden make his way into our house, leaving the footprints as he entered and left. I imagined Jessica dropping the bowl of chips after being startled by the door being burst open, the Doritos spilling on the kitchen floor. Finally, it was the image of the man grabbing Jessica and placing his gloved hand over her mouth and dragging her out to my front door that made me realize there and then that my best friend was gone. I was frozen, trying once again, pathetically, to wake myself up. This couldn't be real. Things like this don't happen to people like me. I'm just a normal kid. These were the thoughts flying through my brain. Cliché, I know, but when an event like this happens, I can tell you now, it really is something that your head can't get around. It seems like hours have passed, but it was probably only really 90 seconds before I eventually accepted that what had happened and told myself I had to act fast. I ran back to my room to get my phone, toes slipping off the end of every other step as I frantically tried to get to a place of safety. As I was trying to dial my mum's number, fighting the uncontrollable shakes in my nerves and trying to ride the overwhelming surge of adrenaline, I looked out of my window. The van was now gone. I sat in my room with the door shut and my chest of drawers pulled down alongside my wall to act as a deadlock on the door, and sat with my back against it, feet against my bed for leverage. Nothing was coming in while I had anything to do with it. My mum had instructed me to stay put and keep safe while she'd call people who needed to be called. She promised me she'd be there soon and everything was going to be okay. Well, I couldn't tell over the phone if she really believed that. My dad, the police, and Jessica's parents were all notified by my mum as I sat hyperventilating in the middle of my room, eyes locked on the barricaded door. Jessica's mum knew all about my mum's working hours and knew that me and her would be home alone that night. She was fine with it, as both our mums knew how mature we were for our ages. But even so, I don't know how my mum managed to break the news that a man had come in the middle of the night and taken her only child. The police arrived first, through my bedroom door. An officer addressed himself. "Olivia Matthews, my name's Detective Paul McKinley. I'm from the police department. We've had a call from your mum about your friend. Can you come out, please?" I didn't trust him right away. I asked him to prove who he was. He gladly obliged and responded by telling me my mum's name and what she did for a living. He also advised me to take a look outside my window. I pulled my wardrobe across my window frame for extra security, so I didn't notice the flashing blue lights of the police response team right outside my house. I took this as validation that he was in fact a policeman and not the man coming back for me and conning his way into my bedroom. I spent the next 15 minutes being comforted by Detective McKinley downstairs on the couch until my mum and Jessica's parents got there. They arrived at almost the same time, with my dad arriving 30 minutes later. He'd abruptly left his work site as soon as he'd heard from my mum. Jessica's mum, jeez, she looked broken. She'd always been a very bubbly person, just like her daughter, and she was kind of like one of the girls in a lot of the ways. I'd always enjoyed her company anyway. I imagined if this night had never happened, then she would have been the type of mum who would have taken us both for brunch to talk about men and gossip when we reached our later teens, but I knew from the minute she walked through my front door on that night that the woman would never be the same again. The sheer agony on her face from her panic and threat over her daughter's fate was enough to make me want to vomit. I honestly didn't recognize her. The detective wanted my mum to be present before I gave my statement. I guessed it was a combination of protocol and wanting to keep me calm to give an accurate account of the night's events. My mum was sat with her arm around me, telling me it was okay and to tell them what happened, encouraging me that anything I could remember at all would be useful. Well, I really didn't know where to begin. So I took a moment, took a deep breath, and told the detective, "I know who did this. I know who's got Jessica." This made Jessica's mum snap out of her pale, shaking daze and made her eyes explode open. She made a beeline towards me. "What? Who has her?" she demanded to know. The rest of the parents and police stared at me with gazes that matched her words. So I composed myself once more and thought back in my mind as best I could, and started with the day I'd gotten off the bus and encountered the man who called himself Dave. I told them everything I could remember, starting with a description of Dave, how he tried to force his way into my home, how he made me feel, the symbol, the van, everything. Jessica went to get snacks, and I saw his van drive onto my street. I knew he was back, so I went to warn her that she needed to get upstairs, but it was too late. I started to cry then. He was already in the house, and he dragged her outside and into his van. "Please, I've told you everything I know about him. Please go and arrest him." Detective McKinley assured me that my description had already been forwarded to the station for a desk team to go through the database and look for suspects that matched my description of the unsub, which they were calling the White Van Man at this time. McKinley and a few of the uniformed officers went to go door to door to see if there were any witnesses of the abduction. A couple of family liaison officers came by to sit with us and try to comfort Jessica's parents. They were both really nice, a man and a woman respectively. The man was a really young, soft-spoken individual who clearly had a lot of experience with traumatized children. He walked me and my parents through the process of this criminal investigation and what would likely follow tonight's initial inquiries. The other stayed with Jessica's parents, I imagine going over similar things. What happened next, I don't think anyone in the room expected, especially Detective McKinley. He'd come back after an hour of canvassing the surrounding neighborhoods for witnesses with a disappointed look on his face. No one in the area had seen anything, and the station had encountered some technical issues while trying to get back to him with an ID on the White Van Man. Time was of the essence in these cases. His calming, confident detective routine had slipped, and he'd now begun to grill me more like a man who was desperate for a win in a dwindling career. He had a frustrated and impatient tone to his questions now, and the wanting me calm approach was long gone. I could smell the booze on his breath when he yelled too. I'd started to feel uncomfortable around him, and my mum felt it too. Things were about to get heated when they arrived. Two sharply dressed men followed by a team in matching polo shirts carrying technical equipment. They addressed themselves as the FBI. One of the agents, who was called Johnson, told McKinley that this case was under the jurisdiction of the Major Violent Crimes Department of the FBI, and the other agent, Rodriguez, who was obviously second in command, told him that his officers were to debrief their team immediately and hand over all statements and progress reports and make their way back to the office for reassignment. McKinley was outraged. I didn't get why at the time. I just thought, hey, what's your problem, dude? You go home and chill in front of the TV. What are you moaning about? But I've seen enough police stations now to know this guy needed to prove his use, and likely his drinking had him on thin ice with his superiors. I learned later on that he was being forced into early retirement after this assignment, and he wasn't being reassigned. I imagine he believed cracking a high-profile case like an abduction and the rescue of a white, upper-class family's only child may have saved his job, but I don't imagine he would have attended many AA meetings after this setback. He was this job is all I got type of cop. Well, that's the impression I got. After McKinley and his team had left, the FBI tech team set up a glistening and recording device on our landline phone, while the agents in charge studied my statement in grave detail before they both went out to the street to study the symbol at the foot of the drive. I managed to catch a glimpse. They had a look not that different from Dave's when he'd seen it. That blank, empty stare as if wishing it was literally anything but what they were actually looking at. I saw them instruct a few guys to take snaps of the drawing with a simple whistle and point, whilst they came back inside. They informed us that it was possible the kidnappers would make contact. And they were right. Around 12:30 a.m., our landline rang. The agents signaled for my mum to answer the phone. My mum looked confused and asked why her, seeing as Jessica was the kidnap victim, so likely her mum would be more susceptible to paying the ransom. Agent Johnson dismissed her question and told her it would be for her. At this point, I could tell my dad and Jessica's parents knew the agents knew something we didn't. The FBI were definitely keeping something from us. The tech activated the tape recorder and placed on a big set of headphones over his ears, before nodding at Agent Rodriguez, who then gave my mum a similar cue to answer the phone. She picked up. "Hello?" my mum managed. At this stage, we couldn't hear the man on the other end of the phone, but I could just imagine Dave and his confident, glib tone. "Yes, this is she. How do you know my name?" She let the man talk for a minute or so, and her breathing started to increase rapidly as the man talked to her before she erupted. "You can go to hell, you psychopathic piece of shit. There's no way you're having my daughter." I had no idea what the man was saying, but it caused my mum to look Jessica's parents' way with a torn look on her face. "You monster. You won't get away with this. There's no way I'm handing my daughter over to you." Her voice rose from a quiver to a loud, angry crescendo. She slammed the receiver down and ran her hand through her hair and massaged her neck in one smooth, continuous motion. Now the phone call was over, she started to avoid eye contact with Jessica's parents. Agent Johnson was asking the tech to try and run a trace on the call, whilst my mum got her bearings together. Once she calmed down, she broke the news to Jessica's parents and my father about the contents of the call. I was right. Jessica was not the target of the kidnapping. I was. This person had been watching me for weeks and had tried to abduct me tonight, knowing my mum wasn't at home. The only hiccup was they mistook Jessica for me. They were asking my mum to bring me to a designated location and have me traded for Jessica. We had 2 hours to bring me, or there would be consequences for Jessica and our families. As if sensing the eruption of emotion to come, Greg, the aforementioned male FLO, took me out of the room and asked me to show him my bedroom so he could make sure it was safe. I knew this was some sort of bullshit excuse to get me out of the room, so I didn't hear mine and Jessica's parents literally screaming at each other, arguing about whether my mum should be handing me over to those monsters. My mum told me days after that Jessica's mum had gone a little crazy, saying, if it should have been me, then I should do the right thing and go. Let Jessica come home and then my mum would be wondering what those animals were doing to her little girl. Well, apparently my mum slapped her and they got into it. Took a few agents to pull them apart by all accounts. I started to get upset the more I thought about the situation. Greg? Yes? Why me? I asked. Greg looked torn by my question and responded with, I'm sorry, Olivia. I can't say, unfortunately, but I have a feeling the agents will let everyone know what's going on real soon. Why not? I countered. Well, this is a very complicated situation, and let's just say the law can be tricky at times. I can't say any more on it. I'm just here to make sure you and your parents are okay. His responses generated more questions than answers, in all honesty, but I could tell I was backing him into a corner. I let him be, and we spent the next hour putting my room back together, whilst making sure there wasn't a boogeyman in my closet, proverbial or actual. We waited for the animosity downstairs to calm down. The other FLO called us down after an hour, and I walked down my stairs to mine and Jessica's parents all sat on my couch with Agent Johnson stood up in front of them, like a teacher in front of his students. I took a seat in between my parents and they both looked down at me with a reassuring smile, as if to tell me I wasn't going anywhere. They knew I'd likely heard the outburst from upstairs. Not that I ever thought my mum would agree to trade me. Nevertheless, I still appreciated it. Agent Johnson spoke. Okay, guys, what I'm about to tell you is strictly confidential. You are now part of one of the largest ongoing criminal investigations in North America." As he was talking, Agent Rodriguez handed out some documents. "I'm going to need each of you to read and sign the bottom before I go any further." We all did without hesitation, but not without noticing the section that stated if we breathed a word about this to anyone outside the FBI, that we would be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. We didn't care, though. We just wanted to know what was going on. "So, who took Jessica? Was it the man who grabbed me last week? Was it Dave?" I asked boldly. Agent Johnson didn't say a word. Instead, he continued looking at Agent Rodriguez, waiting for confirmation that we'd all signed the non-disclosure agreement. Rodriguez continued to review the paperwork, while my dad blurted out a question. "The police were here before. Their desk team or whatever. Well, they were looking for someone. Have you had a lead?" Rodriguez remained flicking through papers, and Johnson continued watching him. My mum backed up my dad's question with, "Yeah, they were. White van man. Who is he? You know, don't you?" Finally, Rodriguez held the stack of papers in both hands and knocked them back into an even pile by firmly tapping the bottom of the NDA forms against his thighs 3 times before sliding them back into a briefcase and locking it tight. He turned and nodded at Agent Johnson, who turned back to face us. "White van men, plural," the agent said bluntly. He let what he'd said sink in and used our stunned silence as an opportunity to continue his explanation. "The people who we believe have Jessica are a large group of dangerous individuals that we've been chasing for a long time now." Part 3. I wasn't sure if what he'd said had really gotten through to my traumatized mind, so I jumped in and interrupted. "Men? People?" I questioned, not letting him get a response in before going off on a tangent. "No, it's not a group. It's just one guy. He said his name was Dave. He tried to take me last week, and now he came back to finish the job, but he took Jess instead, and it's all my fault. Please, you have to find him and get her back. Please." I started to get frustrated. Time was running out, and we didn't have time to spare. In all honesty, I felt like I was responsible for not letting my parents know about Dave in the first place, so I was desperate to get Jess home safe. Agent Johnson held his hand up dismissively to calm my outburst and made sure I was listening before he continued. "The man you described," he sighed in what felt like a bit of shame. "His name isn't Dave. His name is Damien Ramsey." He took another pause and sighed again as if trying to find the words whilst his gaze was aimed at the floor. "He is a criminal informant of the Bureau." Our eyes all widened. This was getting more and more bizarre. Well, my mum went ballistic, as you can imagine, saying that this man tried to force his way into our home last week to do God only knows what to me, and now we find out he works for the FBI? Well, she was appalled and outraged, but my father managed to settle her down. He, as well as everyone else, wanted to know more. The agent waited for the room to settle again before he continued. "He's a real piece of work, no doubt. He was originally a part of the gang we're investigating. They're known as the Swarm." I couldn't help but think back to the butterfly symbol when he said their name, and a knot tightened in my gut. They are a ruthless, clandestine network of human traffickers who are responsible for a large percentage of violent crime all over the southeastern portion of the country. Kidnappings, child abductions, murders, online torture, extortion, blackmail, you name it. He sighed once again and took on a more defeated look the more he delved in on the subject. They've kidnapped over 700 people, some as young as 18 months, and that's just what we know of. The victims are mainly traded for large amounts of money to some of the sickest people on the planet. The others, who aren't sold off, are often sent to the worst red rooms on the dark web. In some of the more high-profile cases, they've slaughtered entire families just acquiring their target. I, along with everyone else, listened with pure disgust. I really thought it was bad Jessica being taken by this Ramsey character, but oh my God, this was becoming so much worse. The agent spoke again. "And these monsters don't stop there. Not everyone who gets taken is made into torture or snuff videos, or traded to grooming gangs or satanic cults. We've had some instances where rich kids have been kidnapped and horrific videos and images have been sent to the family with the sole purpose of extorting money. Jessica's mum gasped, and a little more of her soul left her body as her imagination tortured her already fragile mind. So what was this Ramsey character doing trying to assault my daughter if he's a government asset? My mum blurted out in a rage. Well, Ramsey was what we call a spotter for the swarm. He would identify and stalk potential targets that seemed lucrative. You know the types. Home aloners, tearaways, runaways. He's a clever, sadistic psychopath. He knew the area well, and he sold information on targets to these bastards. These people would be trafficked, and he also knew of people who scout for rich families to extort and blackmail by threatening their loved ones. Ramsey himself was not a fully fledged member of the swarm, but he knew how they worked, so he could tell us the gang would scout kids that they could potentially snatch before obtaining photographs, so to advertise the target on the secret online forums the group use. If these adverts are met by a buyer's specific tastes, then the buyer would then offer to pay an obscene amount of money to the gang for delivery of the target. The way he said that word made the parents in the room recoil with nausea. And believe me, it gets worse. With Ramsey's information, we've discovered that these buyers aren't what or who you'd think they'd be. He bit his bottom lip and clasped his hands together as if anticipating the impact of what he was going to say next. They aren't mentally disturbed sex offenders. The buyers are goddamn CEOs, judges, senators, politicians. Geez, we even have some circumstantial evidence some high-ranking cops are involved. We believe this organized group have direct links to some of the country's most rich and powerful elite. This is why this investigation is top secret, and any links to it at all have to be kept internal. We have assets in the field who we need to keep safe. We couldn't believe how dark this was all turning. I could tell everyone was having a hard time grasping the reality of it all. Most of the members of the group tend to be extremely violent, and all of the high-ranking ones have a lot of sociopathic tendencies, but ultimately, together, they're a well-organized unit, with a strong hierarchy in place, and they'll do anything to further their interests. However, Ramsey, well, he was different. He didn't care about the money or the power. That sick bastard had a taste for the young ones himself. He didn't always just hand over the information, and he often used his line of work to satisfy his own twisted needs. And his arrogance eventually got him in some personal trouble with the law. He was arrested on suspicion of the rape and murder of a 5-year-old boy in Atlanta a few years back. Oh boy, we had DNA evidence, damning CCTV footage. We had that bastard dead to rights, literally. And Georgia has the death penalty. And he said this like a soccer player who just missed a last-minute penalty. Agent Johnson's contempt for the man started to show as he continued with the story. We were literally about to charge him when he got this smug look on his face. That stupid face of his. He turned and says to me with this real superficial arrogance that made me want to snap his neck right then and there. I knew the tone of voice he was talking about. So assured, like he was invincible. And now Agent Johnson did his best to replicate Ramsey's broad Georgia accent. Yeah, you just wait a cotton-picking minute there, Agent. What if I could give you the biggest win of your pathetic career? Who cares about one little toddler who, let's face it, was begging for what he got anyway? I could make you the biggest cat in the alley, Agent Johnson. So, we agreed to drop the charges in regards to the child, in return for his cooperation and information that aided our ongoing investigation into this organized crime syndicate. When Johnson finished, he almost took on the look of Jessica's mom. He looked defeated. He'd sold out this little boy who'd suffered horribly at the hands of this animal for nothing but a few cheap wins. A few bad apples had faced charges, but the tree, so to speak, was still standing. The swarm was still out there, ruining people's lives. In our defense, he gave a lot of information on the gang's methods, sites they used on the deep web, places they would trade their livestock, as he called them, high-profile buyers, and so on. We're a lot more aware of their presence than we were 3 years ago. We were able to solve a lot of cold cases thanks to his insights. He knew dates, places, people, numbers, sites, accomplices. He was a goddamn goldmine and 100% untouchable, and the son of a bitch knew it. He never told us everything at once. He always held stuff back as insurance for him against future convictions. His gaze met mine when he said that last sentence. I now understood why he was so bold with me that day. He never once looked as if being caught bothered him. Ramsey went on to secure a WITSEC agreement, and we moved him to this area. Safe house, immunity, new identity, the works. But we've come to learn one thing tonight. When it comes to the people who we're dealing with here, there ain't no such thing as immunity. At that time, I wasn't sure what that last comment meant, but the agent continued before I could ask what he was talking about. We've had multiple reports of his behavior since he became a CI. Just minor stuff up until today. Public indecency, assault, drug charges. However, any police reports or inquiries on him automatically set off a federal tripwire, and the files became immediately encrypted to anyone except the Bureau. This is to protect the identity and our investigation. Agent Rodriguez piped up for the first time, rising from his seat at our dining room table with a blue folder in his hand, stamped classified in contrasting blood-red ink. We first became aware of tonight's events earlier today. A police report that was filed by a neighbor on the adjacent street 8 days ago. He reported a man matching Ramsey's description being dragged into the side door of a white Ford Transit earlier today by 2 men dressed in all black, with what he described as creepy-ass Easter Bunny masks. Agent Rodriguez backed up the FBI's theory by pulling out a photo from the blue file to show the adults in the room. Greg, after receiving a non-verbal cue from Johnson, distracted me when this was happening by asking me to help him with his iPhone. I knew it was some other bullshit made-up issue again, but I helped him anyway. I knew now that whatever was being shown was bad. The image, whatever it was, made Jessica's mum gasp, burying her face into her husband's embrace. She broke once again into a sobbing shriek. After placing the photo away and closing the folder, he continued giving the account of the neighbor's police report on Ramsey's kidnapping. He said the van had been lingering in the area with the engine running, and the neighbor thought it looked suspicious, as he'd noticed the van had kept showing up in the area over the past week, but no one ever got in or out, and there was no roadworks going on in the area at the time to explain its presence. We believe Karma, and the Swarm, finally caught up with Ramsey. We're not sure if they came here to find Ramsey and found Olivia, or if they came to take Olivia and caught Ramsey in the act. Either way, he belongs to them now. I'd have sympathy for the guy, but maybe now that kid in Atlanta finally has some justice. And Rodriguez immediately realized that last comment likely wouldn't go down well with Jessica's parents, and I noticed he was deliberately maintaining eye contact with Agent Johnson, and Agent Johnson alone. He realized he'd just planted a pretty nasty seed in their already fractured minds about the fate of people who are taken by these animals. Oh, and in case you are wondering, I asked my mum about the photograph. My mum told me a few days after this event that the photo was a screenshot from a video found on a memory stick that was delivered to a wealthy family's home 2 years ago. It had been taken into evidence during a high-profile kidnapping of 2 young kids, and the image sounded horrifying. It showed 2 terrified 6-year-olds sat on a couch with black tape across their mouths. In between the 2 kids sat a man in all black clothes with his arms around the 2 boys in a non-threatening way. She said it would have been just like my father would put his arms around me and Mum in our family photos. But this man wore a mask. A pink Easter Bunny mask. The ears pointed straight up and flopped over just before the top. Totally regular, but it was the eyes. They were pure evil. They were the type of eyes that drain all sense of safety away from you when you look into them. A threatening, horrifying glare that my mum said she still sees from the shadows of her bedroom at night. In front of the couch was a table. On the table there was an array of tools. Screwdrivers, drills, scalpels, pliers, bolt cutters. My mum continued to go into gut-wrenching detail about the wounds the kids had before I asked her to stop, and she gladfully obliged. Once again, we hugged and said we loved each other. We seem to do that a lot these days. Agent Johnson continued his story, but I noticed Rodriguez received a call that he'd clearly been eagerly waiting for. He answered it with haste and left the room to speak. I had a question. Ramsey. When Ramsey was trying to get into my house, he got spooked by a drawing on our drive. I saw you two looking at it earlier. What is it? I asked. Agent Johnson closed his eyes and nodded his head as if to signal he was just about to explain that before I interrupted him. The symbol at the bottom of your drive is the gang's brand. The symbol is a butterfly. You see, in the world of child sex trading, it symbolizes that a buyer is into very young girls. With this being the gang's niche, we can only assume that this is the origin of the symbol, hence the name, the Swarm. We tend to find this symbol branded onto the victims' bodies a lot. Branded? Like with a hot iron? Jessica's dad piped up, and he immediately wished he hadn't because Agent Johnson reluctantly nodded, and Jessica's mum's spirit broke again. Our working hypothesis is that the gang came to town for business or to look for Ramsey. Whilst here, maybe Olivia caught someone's eye. He walks home alone to an empty house. She looks young for her age. All the stuff that makes these sickos see dollar signs. They would have obtained a photo or video, then advertised it on a buyer's forum on the hidden web or black market this gang use. They'll have received an offer from a buyer, so then they'll have begun to arrange the snatch. They'll have been watching the Matthews house for a few days after, to figure out your work schedules and your neighbors' schedules and so on, finding the best time to strike. When everything is set up and a date is set, this is when they spray the symbol on the drive of the house. This is to signal to the snatchers which is the house of the target. They use the yellow so it can be easily seen in the dark. In rare cases, it's also to claim the target too, warn off other interested parties and avoid conflicts of ownership with a rival outfit. I'll be frank though, not many guys like to piss off the Swarm. Well, I didn't doubt that for 1 second. We believe the snatchers were here to take Olivia the day when Ramsey was trying to get into your house. They must have spotted him with you and waited for him to take you inside, where they could have nailed 2 birds with 1 stone. But he noticed the symbol and then fled the scene after realizing the gang could be watching. That stupid son of a bitch walked right into their grasp. Agent Johnson, despite knowing his best source of information into the gang was now likely being branded with 256-degree hot metal and being mutilated with sharp tools by a bunch of psychotic Easter bunnies, couldn't help but replicate the expression of satisfaction Rodriguez had displayed earlier when they thought of the horrific things Ramsey was having done to him for betraying the Swarm. I could tell he really felt better for the boy Ramsey had killed in Atlanta. His current situation now gave him a bit of peace. What goes around truly does come back around. Agent Rodriguez re-entered the room and blurted, "We're on. I'm heading down now. I'll check in soon with a status update. Looks like we don't need Ramsey after all. We could get these bastards tonight." He gave this information with a slight head nod full of positivity. I couldn't help feel my hopes of seeing Jessica alive again flutter upwards for the first time all night. I looked at the clock. We had around 15 minutes before the deadline to trade me for Jess was up. "So, what happens now? What are you going to do to get my Jess back?" Jessica's mum erupted after pulling herself together. "Well, we've been trying to trace the cell number the gang called on to try and locate Jessica, but it's taken a little longer than anticipated. However, our surveillance team have been in position at the warehouse where the caller told us the switch would go down. 2 minutes ago, a white van, matching the description of your statement, pulled up. We're just waiting for the golden approval from our strategic firearms commander to move in and take down the men at the drop. We need the order in case we need to use lethal force. Rodriguez is on his way down now, so if they've brought Jessica to the meet, we'll have her back home soon. I promise you guys." I could tell he was trying to convince himself as much as he was anyone else, but something really didn't feel right to me. When me and my mum talked this over, a few days later, she told me she'd had exactly the same worry. This gang have evaded capture for years and sounded as if they have the local police networks potentially in their pockets. There was no way arresting them and getting Jessica back was going to be as simple as they made out. The silence and tension in the room was killing me, so I asked Agent Johnson a question in private that I really wished I kept to myself. "What's so special about me, Agent? Me and Jessica are always being mistook for the other. People say we're like twins. Why are they so desperate to trade me for her? What's the difference?" I knew it was a selfish question on the bare face of it, but I was genuinely curious at this point. I looked at my mum for approval to answer honestly. She nodded. "Yes, the fact you and Jessica look alike meant they grabbed her instead of you in the dark by mistake. They wouldn't have known she was in the house as you entered through the back garden today, according to your initial statement, and the van always watched the front. On the recording, the man said that they presented the buyer with a video of Jess after the mix-up, but he said she looked too old and was too much on the bigger side. He wanted you because you looked ripe and wore pigtails well. Yeah, it had to be you or no deal." That made me feel sick. My mum shot a look at Agent Johnson to scold him for being a little too honest with the wording of things. Agent Johnson did his best to pull back his error in judgment by adding that likely if I was the one to go downstairs and they tried to take me, then maybe they could have killed Jess to make sure there were no loose ends. He added that if I was the one who'd been taken, I'd be being traded as we speak and there'd be no opportunity to save me like we have with Jessica right now. I could tell he wasn't the best when dealing with younger people, so I humoured him and acted as if actually seeing the bright side of the situation. I could tell he felt better. We smiled at each other. I could tell he felt as though he'd done a good job with the way he gave me and my mum a friendly wink. I still think, to this day, that Agent Johnson was a good man. Our brief, light-hearted moment was blown apart by Agent Johnson's radio handset crackling to life. "Agents down. I repeat, agents are down. Status 0. They're dead. They're all dead. I repeat, status 0. Everyone in the house just dropped what they were doing and focused on the harrowing dialogue coming through the device in Agent Johnson's trembling hand. I could tell he was trying to remain calm for our benefit. "Rodriguez, what's happening? Where are the targets? Where is the girl?" The 5 seconds of silence felt like hours as we all crowded around waiting the news. "It's a goddamn massacre, Johnson. The van was a goddamn diversion. There's 4 bodies here, 2 in the front seat of the surveillance van, and the vehicle is on fire. God, it's blown to shit." He took a moment to cough the smoke out of his lungs before he finished the update. "The other 2 were laying face down in the dirt by van tire marks. Oh my God, their throats have been slit wide open. Jeez, it's a goddamn bloodbath, Bill. Jesus Christ. Come on, Jack. Damn, no pulse." Judging by Agent Johnson's facial expressions, he'd come to a horrific realization. 4 bodies. There was a team of 5. Where's the 5th man? Oh, goddamn. Daniels, Agent Daniels. If you're here, make yourself known. Agent, that's an order. Both agents' tones were panicky, desperate and short of breath. And for the first time tonight, I feel the 2 men truly empathized with what Jessica's parents were feeling. Now I'm older, I have my own theory about what happened to the surveillance team that night outside the warehouse. I imagine the gang had no intentions of making a trade and Jess was never with them. They wanted to lure me to the site under the false sense of security being under FBI escort. They likely had a unit already in place to take out anyone at the meet, and they were planning to take me by force, whilst tying up a lot of loose ends at the same time. Agent Johnson did in fact say it would be their sort of MO. I believe the gang had seen the surveillance team arrive and park up. They then waited. When the time was right, they drove the van into the middle of the dirt road outside the warehouse as a diversion. A group of men armed with weapons lay in wait inside the vehicle. Once the FBI got the golden approval from the SFC, 3 armed agents got out of the FBI vehicle and approached the van with guns drawn. At this time, another group of swarm members attacked the vehicle with a Molotov cocktail or grenade. The hot explosion and the sound of their colleagues screaming in agony, pulling at their burning skin and clothes, caused the men approaching the van to turn their back on it. This gave the group in the van a chance to jump out and kill 2 of the 3 federal agents and kidnap the other. I guess we'll never know what truly happened, but after 5 years of going over it in my head, That's the most plausible scenario I can think of. There was maybe an hour or so that passed by since the incident, mainly filled by Jessica's mum screaming at the agents, wailing and shrieking, asking where her little girl was and what they were doing to get her back. Well, Agent Johnson's superior then called him to lose his shit and asked him what on earth had possessed 2 decorated agents to send a team of just 5 people to take down the most dangerous organized crime group in North America. Johnson attempted to justify his actions by saying too many agents may have got them detected by the gang and cost them their chance of taking them down and saving Jessica. Well, I would have felt bad for the guy, if not trying to pull my head out of oblivion. The realization I was never going to see my best friend again was a blow I wasn't ready for. When people asked me what the darkest time of my life was, it was this hour. The uncertainty, the waiting. The time between learning our last hope to get my friend back was gone and awaiting to hear what had become of the hard-working agent who was doing his job. And of course, my best friend who had never done anything other than be nice to everyone she'd ever met. The anxiety and dread pulled my insides into knots that I never thought could be undone. And then, our landline phone rang. The same process as before, with the tech guy setting up the recording and listening devices whilst once again attempting to trace the call. Only this time, Agent Johnson picked up the phone, and he wasn't in the mood for games. "Where is my agent? You hand them both over now, and we can talk about a deal. You hurt either one of them, and I promise I will pursue you to the full extent of my ability with the entire backing of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The only headset was being worn by one of the FBI's profilers, so Agent Rodriguez hit the speaker button so we could hear the man's words and what he was saying about the missing agent. I look back now and wished he hadn't done that. What I heard over the next 7 minutes is forever burned into my head. A drawn-out Virginian accent came over the speaker. "Now, come on, Agent. You've been doing that for 3 years now. And you're still seen as a failure in your department. We're still going strong. Not even that little rat you had working for you could help you. You give me back my agent and the girl, you sick bastards," Johnson snapped. A clown-like cackle burst from the speaker. "Well, ain't that cute? You allowed a child being raped and murdered to go unpunished, just so you could further your investigations. And you call us the monsters? Typical lawman." I couldn't help but sympathize, as I could tell this struck Agent Johnson's nerves. In a sense, the man was right. It was hard to defend the hypocrisy of the justice system at times. Johnson had traded the life of the boy Ramsey killed for a tick in the wing column in his investigation. I knew Agent Johnson had been haunted by what he did for a long time. He barely had a comeback. And besides, we're way past making deals. We gave you a chance to make a deal. Girl for the girl, and you tried to trap us. So now you're going to feel the consequences of your actions. The man took a pause and said something that made all our hearts wrench. "And then we're going to come get the one we want. Whatever means necessary. We're done pussyfooting around, and we got a lot riding on that little girl you got there. She's just what our guy wants." My mum and dad held me as if to give me some sort of feeling of being safe. Jessica's mum looked at us, and I swear I saw her look for Jessica to give her the same reassuring hug. And when she grabbed nothing but air, for the 10th time today, I saw her spirit break that little bit more. Another pause and a few inaudible noises before we heard the agonized screams of a man. The agent. But there was something about his groans of pain. It was off. Daniels, it's Johnson. Shout out anything you can to help us locate you. What do you see? Give me something." "Oh, he won't be able to do that, unfortunately. You see, we thought you might try something like that, being a crafty Fed and everything. And so we ripped out his tongue." He said that with a coldness that had a lot of us taken back. You could see that broke Agent Johnson, knowing his judgment and decisions had this man in this situation. A family man with 2 kids who should be home right now, watching the Lakers take on the Raptors in the playoffs with a cold beer. right before he tucks the boys in goodnight after a day of fighting the bad guys of the world. Instead, he's been held against his will, beaten, tortured, and mutilated. Don't worry though, Agent. Things will stop being cut and ripped off this gentleman if he just writes down in this paper what we want to know. We all looked at Agent Johnson before my dad asked, "What is he talking about?" "That is goddamn classified," he snapped. "Well, of course you know, Bill." The use of Agent Johnson's first name visibly startled him. The man continued, "Of course you could put your man out of a lot of misery and suffering, if you just give me the name that I want. You have my word, lawman. I'll put a bullet in him right now. No more games. But if you don't..." He took a deliberate pause to allow the gravity of his innuendo to hit the agent's imagination. "Well, let's just say he's got 10 toes and 5 fingers he doesn't need in order for him to write a name on a little piece of paper. And if needs must, there's 2 rows of pearly whites here to play with. I am not handing over another innocent for you psychos just to butcher," Agent Johnson exploded, his eyes now glazed over with tears of torment. There was another horrific 5-second pause before the man took a deep inhale through his nose. "Fair dues, Bill. Fair dues. Have it your way." The dull, drawn-out shrieks of Agent Daniel's tongueless mouth screeched through our landline as he was dragged off out of audio range of the call. It was hard to tell with no pronunciation, but we were all pretty sure he was screaming the words, "Please, no." We all could tell he was sobbing, too. I didn't think this night could get any worse. Then the speaker projected the man's voice again. "Now then, put Jessica's mom on the phone, please." We all gasped. Our eyes widened, and I felt my pupils dilating. There was no way this was going to be good. Jessica's mom took the receiver from Agent Johnson. She's already fighting back tears. These people didn't seem to care, though. She dived right in. "Hello, please just give me my little girl back. She's a sweet little girl who hasn't done anything wrong. Mommy. Jessica's voice interrupted her mother's feeble attempt at appealing to the kidnapper's better nature. These people didn't have one. "Oh my God, baby. Yes, I'm here. Everything's going to be okay. I'm here, and we're going to get you home, I promise." The man came back on the phone. "Hello, Mrs. Adams. I need you to know that this isn't anything personal. It's just business. Scrap what I said earlier. This right here. This was the worst moment of my life. This was when we all knew. This isn't the way I wanted it to go down, honestly." He almost sounded sincere. "The FBI have stepped on our toes one too many times, and they've made us very angry. A message needs to be sent. I hope you understand. Oh, please tell the Matthews family that we'll see them very soon. That debt is still owed, and we will collect." Jessica's mom knew at this point what was to come. All she could do was to find the strength to try and comfort her little girl and be there for her in what was no doubt unimaginable hell for her. The image of her shaken frame and tears bursting from her eyes will forever stay with me. To her credit, she did her best to remain strong, telling Jessica everything would be okay. She started to sing her the lullaby down the phone from when Jess was 5 years old and under the weather. The song always made her feel better. Every kid has that one song their mum sings to them when they need comfort and warmth. I hope it gave Jess some sense of her mother's presence in those last moments. I think I'd have a lot more issues than I do now had Agent Rodriguez not acted as quickly as he did. He dived over the dining room table to switch off the speakerphone just as the sound of an electric drill revved to life and Jessica began to scream in abject terror. We all watched Jessica's mom attempt to hold herself together, tears leaking from her eye sockets. Jessica's father embraced her mother in a state I'd never seen him in before. We all watched the last of her soul shatter as she sang, "Hush, little baby, into the phone as Jessica screamed in pure agony for her mum and dad to come save her from the bad man. She stayed with Jessica until the very end. We never heard another voice on the line after the screaming stopped. The phone went dead almost immediately afterwards. Jessica's mum collapsed when the caller hung up. A unit arrived shortly after the call went dead. It was from the US Federal Witness Protection Program. They gave my family all new identities and relocated us out of the country. Apparently that was also part of the document we'd signed earlier. We weren't safe anymore and needed to disappear. Well, I can't give much more detail on this for obvious reasons. It was just that our family had to go missing. Well, the FBI concluded it was unlikely the swarm would come for Jessica's parents. Their debt was paid, and they'd hurt them enough. We said our emotion-packed goodbyes and offered what fortuitous condolences we could muster. We packed our essential items in the 10 minutes we had before a black sedan came to collect us with a SWAT team escort sandwiching our ride. And I watched my home for the last 13 years fade away into the distance as me and my parents embarked on our new life, away from this nightmare. Apparently, while we were being removed from the country, the FBI finally traced the call made to our landline. It led to a remote location way off the grid just outside of our state. The FBI and evidence response team followed up to some old abandoned storage facility. There, they found the remains of 3 bodies: Daniels, Ramsey, and Jess. We were told one was totally dismembered. One was hanging by their neck from barbed wire attached to the roof support beams, and the other had been drowned in boiling hot oil. They didn't tell us which was which, but when Jessica's mom went to identify her body, that was the final straw. She committed suicide the next day by overdosing on her prescription diazepam. Her father is reportedly still alive, but by all accounts he's turned to a life of alcohol and antidepressants. Our handler says she doubts she'll see out the year at the rate he's going. It always hurts to hear the lasting damage of this horrendous event. I hope they all find each other again someday. Well, me and my family have settled now in our new home. We're making a go at a normal life, but we will all forever be molded by the events of that one night. I won't walk anywhere alone. I have severe separation anxiety, and it's affected a lot of my romantic relationships. I can't keep a boyfriend for longer than a month, as I can't talk to any of my boyfriends about my issues and where they stem from, as it's against my WITSEC agreement. Our case handler says we're the luckiest people she's ever met, and we need to embrace this gift that we've been given. We're the only family to have ever been targeted by the swarm and make it out alive. All the other families out there like me and my parents weren't as fortunate. Well, I doubt I'd use the words lucky and fortunate. Our handler wasn't there that night listening to those people die in some dark, dingy old building screaming for mercy. But at the same time, I do get where she's coming from. I always read the online news articles from my old town and surrounding states to keep an eye on the alarming number of rising missing person cases. It's horrifying, mainly young girls too, who just vanish from their homes and neighborhoods without a trace. The swarm is responsible, I know it. Well, even though I'm told I'm safe now and getting on with the rest of my life, I always find myself coming back to 3 things from that night. 1. The look of Jessica's mum's heartbreaking as she sung her baby to sleep for the final time, a moment that haunts me on dark nights. 2. The last moment me and Jessica shared together before she was taken, that lingering warm smile we gave each other as she stood in my bedroom doorway, a treasure I truly hold dearly on those same dark nights. And 3. The comment Agent Johnson quoted about Damon Ramsey in regards to his own WITSEC agreement protecting him from the swarm. When it comes to these people that we're dealing with, there's no such thing as immunity. Well, damn. Not sure what else to say at the end of that one. Oof. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, I haven't done a dark web, deep web story in quite a long time, and that certainly was one, wasn't it? Damn. Whew. Well, thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to share in the comment section below the video, and as ever, I'll do my best to reply to as many as I can. Whew. Oof. What a way to end the week. Well, of course, I'll be back again very, very soon, probably on Sunday night with one of the series that I've been neglecting, with any luck. Definitely back with something. So, you'll try and enjoy your weekends. A little bit more freedom for a lot of us, finally. So, hope you get out there to the best of your abilities and have a bit of fun. I'll see you all again real soon. Till the next time, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.